I always thought I had a handle on life. People knew me as a hard-working physical therapist, someone dedicated to helping others get back on their feet. I took pride in my career, my family, and the calm I'd built around us. It wasn't just a job to me, I loved what I did. And at home, I had Sophie, our 9-year-old daughter. She was the heart of everything I did, the reason I worked so hard. Seeing her happy, watching her grow, that's what gave my life meaning. But lately, things had started to feel off. Lauren, my wife, had always been focused on her career too, but I'd noticed a shift, like she was drifting away. She was missing more of Sophie's big moments, recitals, parent-teacher nights, even Saturday soccer games. Her reasons were always the same: urgent work or last-minute meetings. And it was always with her boss, Ethan. At first, I didn't question it. Work can be unpredictable, and I wanted to be supportive. But after a while, the excuses started feeling too thin, too frequent. One evening, I came home to find Lauren rushing out the door, mumbling something about another late-night meeting. She barely even looked my way, much less Sophie's. She'd left her laptop open on the kitchen counter in her hurry, a rare slip. Normally, she was so guarded with her things. I sat there for a moment, almost too worn out to care, until a notification caught my eye. A new message had popped up, and the name Ethan stared back at me in bold letters. And there it was, as clear as day, right in front of me. I'm counting the minutes, beautiful. Just like that, everything changed. My heart felt like it had been put through a shredder. My wife was cheating on me, lying to me, to Sophie, hiding behind the same empty excuses I'd believed for months. I stared at that message, feeling every shred of trust drain away. My mind kept coming back to Sophie, how she'd been missing time with her mom, time she'd never get back. That wasn't just betrayal, it was stealing from our family, robbing us of moments we couldn't replace. I wasn't flashy or the type to get caught up in drama. I wanted to confront her right there, force her to explain herself. I wanted to see her try to justify throwing away everything we'd built together, why she'd chosen some sleazy affair over her own family. But I stopped myself. Lauren was too good at talking her way out of things. If I confronted her, she'd lie, spin it, make me question what I'd seen with my own eyes. I wouldn't give her that chance. So I sat down in the dim kitchen, watching the message fade from the screen. And that's when it hit me: if she was willing to tear our family apart for some guy, then I'd show her just how it felt to lose everything. The next morning, I woke up before dawn, that message still burned into my mind. I watched Lauren go about her morning routine, laughing at something on her phone, scrolling through her messages, and sipping her coffee like it was just another day. It hit me then. I couldn't remember the last time we'd really talked. 4 months now, she'd been drifting through these empty conversations, half listening whenever I tried to connect. Now it all made sense. She wasn't just distracted. She was distracted by someone else. Everything started clicking into place: the late nights, the missed events with Sophie, the urgent work with her boss, Ethan. I wanted to demand answers right there, see her explain herself, maybe even try to talk her way out of it. But I knew better. Lauren was good at making things sound reasonable, twisting words until doubt crept in. I wasn't about to let her twist her way out of this. No, if I wanted to handle this right, I'd need to play my own cards carefully. Once she left for work, I sat at the kitchen table, the remnants of that message echoing in my mind. That was when it came to me: if she was willing to tear our family apart for some guy, then I'd make sure everyone saw the damage. I picked up my phone, called around, and booked the nicest place in town, a high-end restaurant we'd gone to only once. I made up a guest list that would have everyone who mattered to her there: friends, family, colleagues, and of course Ethan and his wife, Rachel. I planned the night down to every detail, even hiring a photographer to capture each moment. When Lauren came home that night, I was already in character. Supportive husband, thoughtful and excited. I told her about the party with a straight face, pretending it was all for her. I hyped up her recent accomplishments, like she was some kind of rising star. She stared at me, surprised, maybe even a little suspicious, but she took the bait. Why wouldn't she? I'd always been the guy to go the extra mile to make her feel special. The night before the party, Lauren mentioned casually that she'd invited Ethan. She said it in the same offhand way she might mention a Saturday brunch with friends. I had to fight to keep my face relaxed, to keep the anger from boiling over. But I nodded, playing my role, even adding a great idea. Let him see what all the fuss is about. The final piece was in place. I had no doubt she planned to slip away, find a private moment to meet him, even during her own celebration. I went along, throwing in a light joke about not being able to wait to toast her successes. She laughed, that light, thoughtless laugh that used to mean something to me. But now, as I watched her, I felt only a cold, steady anger. She'd set the stage for her betrayal, and all I had to do now was finish the show. The night of the party arrived, and I made sure everything was perfect. The restaurant was set up with a welcoming, elegant touch, lavish decorations, candlelit tables, and that feeling of sophistication that Lauren loved to flaunt. As I walked through the room, making sure the setup was just right, I felt calm. This was it. This was the night I'd turn her lies into a spotlight. Guests began to arrive, and I greeted each of them, putting on my best friendly smile. I shook hands, laughed at old jokes, and thanked everyone for coming to celebrate Lauren. I could feel the eyes of her friends and family on me, full of warmth and admiration, thinking I was just the proud, supportive husband they always knew. Even her parents came up to me, talking about how proud they were of her. I smiled and nodded, playing the part, letting the anticipation build as I waited for Lauren to arrive. Finally, Lauren walked in, looking every bit the part she'd always played, the successful career woman, beaming in a sleek black dress that turned heads as she moved through the room. She looked thrilled to be the center of attention. I watched her float from guest to guest, glowing under the praise, unaware that her whole world was about to collapse. When everyone was settled in with drinks and conversation, I took my place at the head of the room and raised a glass. The clinking of glasses and murmurs died down as I thanked everyone for coming. With all eyes on me, I turned toward Lauren and gave her a practiced smile. Tonight, we're here to celebrate Lauren's incredible accomplishments. I started, my voice steady. She's put in a lot of hours, a lot of sacrifice. I paused, letting the words hang, watching her expression shift ever so slightly. In fact, I continued, she's been so busy with her work and her commitments that I think it's time we all celebrate her other achievements as well. Confused glances exchanged across the room, but I kept going, that calm smile never leaving my face. I gave a slight nod to the waiter, who dimmed the lights, and then reached into my pocket for the remote. With a click, I lit up the projector behind me. On the screen appeared a collection of messages between Lauren and Ethan. Messages that left nothing to the imagination. Text after text, words of love and anticipation, hotel receipts, pictures they'd sent each other. All of it was there for everyone to see. The guests went silent, stunned, the cheerful atmosphere instantly stripped away. Some people gasped, others covered their mouths, horrified. Lauren froze, her face paling as the realization hit her. She rose from her chair, stammering, "Ryan, wait. You don't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly, Lauren," I replied, my voice like steel. I turned to the crowd. While I was taking care of our daughter and building our life, Lauren was busy with, well, you can all see for yourselves. I shifted my gaze to Ethan, who looked as pale as Lauren. His wife, Rachel, sat there in shock, her hand shaking as she held her wine glass. I made sure everyone got a good look at him too, the other half of this betrayal. The room hung in silence, thick with tension, as people took in the images and texts flashing across the screen. Lauren stood frozen, her face drained of color, eyes wide as her carefully built image crumbled before everyone she cared about. I could almost see the panic flooding her mind, scrambling for a way out. But there was no escaping this. Ethan shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his face flushed and tense, avoiding the gaze of his wife, Rachel, who looked like she was caught between shock and fury. Rachel's hand clenched tighter around her wine glass, her knuckles white. Finally, her expression twisted into something darker, and in one swift motion, she hurled the glass across the table at Ethan, the red wine splattering across his shirt. Without a word, she pushed back her chair, stood up, and stormed out, leaving Ethan scrambling to wipe at the stain, too stunned to react. Lauren tried again, reaching a hand out toward me, her voice cracking. "Ryan, please, let's talk about this. This isn't what you think. What I think." I cut in, my voice cold and calm. "No, Lauren, this is exactly what it looks like. You've been lying to me, to Sophie, and to everyone here. But maybe you're right. Let's let everyone decide for themselves." Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again, but no words came out. She looked around the room, and it was clear there'd be no sympathy waiting for her there. Friends, family, and colleagues she'd known for years sat back, staring, whispering in disbelief. There was no way to charm her way out of this one. I nodded to the photographer I'd hired, who had been snapping away, capturing the reactions, the shock, the disgust etched into every face in the room. Every detail of this night would be remembered, and I intended to make sure Lauren wouldn't forget a single second of it. "Consider these photos a reminder, Lauren," I said, voice steady as I met her gaze. "Every person in this room now knows exactly who you are and what you chose to do with our family. And I'll make sure the rest of your world knows it too." She choked back a sob, eyes flashing between anger and desperation. I felt nothing but a calm satisfaction as I turned back to the crowd, offering a final polite smile. "Thank you all for coming tonight. The drinks are on me. Consider it a farewell gift." Without another glance at Lauren, I walked out, leaving her and Ethan to face the fallout of their betrayal in a room filled with stunned witnesses. As I stepped out of the restaurant, the night air felt sharp and electric, the adrenaline from the reveal still pumping through me. But I didn't go straight to the car. I walked past it, drawn to the small park down the street where I'd spent countless Saturday mornings with Sophie. The place was empty, except for a few swings swaying in the breeze and a streetlight casting a pool of light over the benches. I found myself taking a seat, letting the strange calm wash over me. I sat there, looking around, as if waiting for something, or maybe just taking in this quiet moment after the storm. It was only when I glanced at my watch and realized almost an hour had passed that I stood up. But as I turned to head back, I noticed something. At the far end of the park, standing partially hidden by shadows, was Ethan. He hadn't seen me yet, leaning against the fence, his hands gripping the chain links like he was trying to steady himself. He looked as wrecked as I felt, red-faced, shirt untucked, still stained with the wine Rachel had thrown at him. He must have left right after I did, not ready to face anyone back at the restaurant. For a moment, I almost turned away, ready to leave him to his misery. But something in me decided otherwise. I walked up slowly, letting my footsteps crunch against the gravel, and he finally noticed me. He looked up, eyes dark and guarded. "Didn't think I'd see you here," he mumbled, barely meeting my gaze. "Funny, I could say the same thing about you," I replied, keeping my voice steady. I stood there, watching him squirm, feeling the weight of the silence between us. He glanced down, his voice barely audible. "I messed up, Ryan. I don't know what else to say." I took a deep breath, letting his words hang in the air. "You know, Ethan, it's not about what you did to me. It's about Sophie. About the family you didn't think twice about ripping apart." He flinched, as if the words hit harder than anything else. I didn't mean for it to get this far. I didn't want to," he trailed off, his excuse sounding hollow even to him. "You didn't want to what, Ethan?" I asked, my voice cutting through the quiet night. "Didn't want to hurt anyone? Because I think that ship sailed a long time ago." He looked up, defeated, like a man who'd lost everything he didn't know he cared about. And for the first time, I saw him clearly. Not as the man who took my wife, but as the hollow shell he'd become, clinging to some semblance of control in a life he'd destroyed. In that moment, I realized he wasn't worth any more of my time, my anger, or my pain. He'd already lost. Lost his wife, his reputation, and whatever pride he'd once had. I took one last look at him, then turned and walked away without another word. When I got home, I found Sophie asleep on the couch, waiting up for me with her blanket draped over her. Gently, I picked her up and carried her to her bed, the warmth of her small hand in mine grounding me. I knew then that this was all that mattered. After that night, things fell into a strange, quiet rhythm. Lauren moved out temporarily, staying with a friend while we sorted out the next steps. We kept things civil around Sophie, managing drop-offs, pickups, and weekend schedules. I stayed focused on her, pouring myself into every activity, every project, just to keep things stable for her. But there were moments, when the house was quiet, when I'd remember the life I thought we had and feel the weight of it all crash over me. Then, one evening, I got an unexpected message. From Rachel, Ethan's wife. We'd hardly spoken at the party, and after she stormed out, I assumed I wouldn't hear from her again. But here she was, texting me to meet for coffee. I hesitated at first, unsure if there was anything left to say, but curiosity won out. I agreed. We met at a small cafe out of town, a quiet place where neither of us would be recognized. When I walked in, she was already there, staring into her cup, looking tired and guarded. She glanced up as I approached, offering a small, tense smile. "Thanks for meeting me," she said softly, gesturing for me to sit. "Of course. I was a little surprised to hear from you, to be honest," I admitted, taking a seat across from her. She took a deep breath, fidgeting with her coffee cup. "I wanted to see how you were doing. And I guess I wanted to talk to someone who understands." Her voice was raw, like she'd been holding back tears for days. The truth is, after that night, everything fell apart. I mean, it was already falling apart, I just hadn't faced it. "I keep wondering how it got this far." I nodded, understanding the feeling all too well. "Yeah. I've asked myself that question more times than I can count." We sat in a shared silence, each lost in our own thoughts, our own tangled mix of anger, sadness, and regret. Rachel was quiet for a long moment, then looked up, her gaze clear and direct. "I'm done with him," she said, her voice steady. "I've been thinking about it since that night. I want out." I didn't want to admit it at first, but I deserve more than being someone's afterthought. I looked at her, seeing the strength beneath the hurt, the resolve that had probably taken months to find. "You do deserve more, Rachel," I said honestly. "We both do." We ended up talking for over an hour, swapping stories, reliving moments of betrayal that felt surreal in hindsight. In some strange way, the conversation was cathartic. For the first time, I wasn't alone in my anger, and neither was she. We shared a final nod of understanding before we left, each of us walking away a little lighter, a little more certain of what we needed to do next. That night, I felt an odd sense of peace as I tucked Sophie into bed. For the first time, I felt like the pieces were slowly beginning to fall into place, like maybe there was a way forward from all of this, just one step at a time. In the days that followed, I filed for divorce. It was a decision I'd known was coming, but actually going through with it felt like a huge weight being lifted. My lawyer handled most of the details, guiding me through the endless paperwork. Each form I signed felt like another step toward closing this painful chapter, another inch of distance from the betrayal that had torn my life apart. Lauren's response to the filing was predictable. She called, leaving messages pleading for one more chance, telling me she'd do anything to keep our family together. But I'd already seen enough. I knew these words were just a reflection of her desperation, of her trying to hold on to the life she'd carelessly thrown away. I'd already given her trust, patience, and love, all the chances she'd ever need. She was only sorry because she'd been caught. One evening, after ignoring her messages for days, I finally agreed to meet. Not because I needed closure, but because I needed her to understand that this was over, once and for all. We met at a small cafe, one of those places we used to go when we were younger. She arrived looking weary, like she hadn't slept much, and tried to smile when she saw me, though her eyes were shadowed with worry. "Thanks for coming," she said quietly, stirring her coffee without looking up. I nodded, keeping my tone steady. I wanted to make things clear between us, for Sophie's sake. "I don't want this dragging on." She winced, but nodded. "I understand. I know I hurt you, Ryan. But can't we try again, for her? She needs both her parents." "She needs honesty and stability," I replied, my voice calm but firm. "You didn't just betray me, Lauren. You betrayed her, our family. I'm not willing to put her through the pain of this all over again." She took a shaky breath, her voice breaking. "I know I made a mistake, but people make mistakes. Doesn't what we had mean anything to you?" I held her gaze, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. "What we had mattered to me more than anything, Lauren. But you were willing to throw it all away. And now, I need to do what's best for Sophie. And that means moving on." The reality of it seemed to sink in for her, and she finally looked down, defeated. "I'm sorry," she whispered, the words sounding hollow. I didn't reply, just stood up, nodding toward the door. "We'll figure out the details through our lawyers. This is about Sophie now." Without waiting for a response, I walked away, feeling lighter with every step. I knew then that there was no turning back, no more room for doubt or regret. The life we'd shared was over, and I was ready to build something new, for me and for Sophie. After that conversation, things started to move quickly. With Lauren and I now fully separated, I threw myself into creating a new, stable routine for Sophie. Every morning, we'd make pancakes together, flipping them clumsily, but always with laughter. Evenings were dedicated to puzzles, movies, and late-night story time. She was my priority now, and I wanted her to feel that no matter what had changed, she'd always have me by her side. Lauren, meanwhile, tried her best to keep up appearances. She'd visit on weekends, putting on a brave face for Sophie, pretending everything was fine. She'd laugh and chat, bringing little gifts, trying to make things feel normal. But there was always an awkwardness between us, a stiffness that Sophie seemed to pick up on. She'd look back and forth between us, sensing that something was off even if she didn't understand the details. Then, one Friday night, after I'd tucked Sophie in and was finishing up a few emails, I got a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I opened it cautiously, only to find Lauren standing there, looking worn and frazzled. Her hair was pulled back, eyes tired and red-rimmed, and she held a stack of papers clutched tightly in her hands. "Ryan, I need to talk to you. Please," she said, her voice almost pleading. I sighed, stepping aside to let her in. She walked past me, setting the papers on the kitchen counter, glancing around the house as if seeing it for the first time. "Is everything okay?" I asked, keeping my tone even. She took a deep breath, looking down at the papers. "These are the final terms of the divorce," she said, her voice faltering. I can't believe it's really happening." I watched her, waiting, feeling a strange mix of patience and detachment. "Lauren, this was your choice. I'm only following through on what you started." She nodded, biting her lip, then finally met my eyes. "I know, but it doesn't make it any easier. I miss us, Ryan. I miss what we had." I crossed my arms, my voice steady. What we had, Lauren, was trust, respect, and commitment. And that's gone. You can't just undo what you did. She looked down, nodding, as if finally realizing there was no way to bridge this divide. Slowly, she gathered up the papers, her hands trembling slightly, and held them out to me. "I'll sign them," she whispered, almost to herself. "For Sophie." I took the papers, not feeling the triumph I thought I might, just a quiet acceptance. "Thank you," I replied, my tone softer than before. "That's all I want, for Sophie to have stability." She gave a small, tearful nod, and without another word, she turned and left, closing the door softly behind her. That night, as I sat in the dim kitchen with the divorce papers in my hands, I felt a strange kind of peace settle over me. The life I'd once known was gone, but what remained was something solid, something real. And for the first time, I felt ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. Once the papers were officially signed and filed, the finality of it all settled in. It was like a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying finally lifted, leaving behind a quiet space. Life moved forward with a different kind of rhythm, one that was simple and steady. I focused on my work, building a life that was clean, honest, and steady for Sophie and me. Weekends became our special time together, our little adventures. Long drives to nearby parks, trips to the zoo, homemade pizza nights. We created a new normal, one that I hoped would fill the gap Lauren's absence had left. But as much as I tried to make things seamless, Sophie had questions. One Saturday afternoon, while we were painting birdhouses at the dining table, she looked up at me, her small brows furrowed. "Daddy, why doesn't Mommy live here with us anymore?" she asked, her voice soft but direct. I knew this question would come, but hearing it still felt like a punch to the gut. I set down my paintbrush and looked at her, choosing my words carefully. "Sweetheart, sometimes grown-ups make decisions that mean they can't stay together the way they used to. But just because Mommy and I don't live together anymore doesn't mean we don't both love you very, very much." She nodded, seeming to take it in, but her eyes were still thoughtful. "So, you and Mommy are still friends?" The question made me pause. I didn't want to lie to her, but I also didn't want her to feel the hurt and betrayal that had come with the truth. "We both care about you, and that's what matters most. We're always here for you, no matter what." Sophie seemed satisfied with that, going back to her paintbrush, dipping it into the blue paint with her usual focus. But I could tell that question would probably come up again someday. For now though, I just wanted her to have as much peace and normalcy as possible. Over time, my relationship with Lauren became strictly logistical. She'd pick up Sophie on her weekends and drop her off on Sundays, always keeping things polite, almost too polite. There was a stiffness between us now, an awkward silence that had never been there before. I didn't let it bother me, but I could see how much she struggled with it, how much she seemed to want things to go back to the way they were. But I was past that point, and there was no going back. One evening, as I was reading Sophie a bedtime story, I looked at her small, peaceful face, and it struck me how resilient she'd been through all of this. She hadn't had a choice in any of it, yet she'd adapted, filling her world with new routines, new memories, and a kind of unshakable trust in me that felt both beautiful and humbling. That night, as I tucked her in and turned off the light, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Everything I did from here on out was for her, to give her a life that was steady, loving, and safe. Whatever Lauren had thrown away, Sophie and I would rebuild, stronger and, in a way, even better than before. Months passed, and the dust from the divorce slowly settled. Our routines became second nature, a life where Sophie's laugh filled the house and our days were filled with small joys. Pancake Sundays, her soccer games, even the simple weeknight dinners where she'd tell me all about her day. I found myself looking forward to every little thing with her, each moment adding a new layer to our bond. One evening, I was cooking dinner when Sophie came running into the kitchen with her tablet in hand, her eyes wide with excitement. "Daddy, look! My friend Ellie's mom invited us to her birthday party on Saturday. Can we go?" I smiled, leaning over to look at the invitation. Sophie didn't often get this excited, and seeing her joy was contagious. "Of course we can go. We'll get Ellie a nice gift too. How about a big art set?" She nodded enthusiastically, then ran off to draw her a birthday card, already bubbling over with ideas. But later that night, as I was cleaning up, I received a text from Lauren. I hadn't expected to hear from her, but there it was, a simple, brief message. "I heard about the birthday party. Can we go together?" It might mean a lot to Sophie to have both her parents there. I read the message twice, not sure how to respond. Part of me resisted the idea, knowing that being around her in a social setting could bring up memories I didn't want to revisit. But Sophie's face flashed through my mind, and I remembered how much she missed seeing us together, even in a small way. So I took a breath, typed a response, and agreed, keeping it short and neutral. Saturday came, and Sophie was practically glowing as we got ready. She wore her favorite dress, twirling in front of the mirror as I helped her with her hair. When Lauren arrived to pick us up, I saw the surprise in Sophie's eyes as she realized we were all going together. She grinned up at me, her happiness filling the room. It reminded me that, no matter what I felt, this was her moment, too. The party itself was simple, a backyard celebration, filled with balloons, cupcakes, and a bunch of kids playing on a rented bounce house. Lauren and I stayed close to Sophie but kept a careful distance from each other, making small talk with other parents but mostly focusing on her. I could feel Lauren's eyes on me now and then, lingering as if searching for some kind of understanding or connection. But I didn't return her gaze. I stayed focused on Sophie, watching her laugh, run, and play without a care. As the sun began to set, Sophie climbed up onto a swing, her face flushed with happiness, calling for both of us to push her higher. Lauren and I exchanged a quick glance, then took our places on either side of her, gently pushing her up toward the darkening sky. Sophie squealed with delight, the sound carrying over the yard as if nothing had ever changed. At that moment, I felt something close to peace, not for the life we once had, but for the one Sophie and I were building. This was enough. I didn't need anything more from Lauren, and I was no longer looking back. Whatever had happened was behind us, and I was finally ready to leave it there. The days after the divorce felt quieter, as though life itself had settled into a calm I hadn't felt in years. Sophie's questions about why things had changed came up from time to time, but they were softer now, as though she, too, was finding her way. I filled our days with familiar routines, creating a steady foundation for us both. Then one evening, as I went through Sophie's backpack, I found a hand-drawn invitation. It was for her school's upcoming father-daughter dance. Sophie must have heard me find it because she came running, practically bouncing. "Daddy, are we going? It's next Saturday." Her eyes sparkled with excitement. Seeing her enthusiasm, I knew I couldn't miss it. "Of course we're going," I said, scooping her up. She beamed, thrilled. She planned what to wear, even asking if I'd wear my fancy tie from a holiday party. Saturday came, and Sophie twirled in her lavender dress, a smile brighter than I'd seen in months. I put on the requested tie and held her hand as we walked into the transformed school gym, filled with fairy lights, paper decorations, and a cheerful crowd of dads and daughters. Sophie and I danced to every song, even the silly ones. For a little while, the world fell away as we spun, laughed, and let go of everything that had been weighing us down. During a break, I noticed Rachel, Ethan's ex-wife, volunteering at the refreshment table. She was helping the other moms, handing out snacks, and keeping things running smoothly. She spotted me, giving a small, friendly wave. We hadn't seen each other since coffee months ago, but that shared understanding between us hadn't faded. When Sophie ran off with a friend, I wandered over to the table, where Rachel was busy pouring punch. She smiled, her expression warm and easy. "Fancy seeing you here," she said, handing me a cup with a laugh. Yeah, I didn't realize these things were such a big deal, I replied, looking around. But Sophie's been counting down the days. Rachel nodded, her smile softening. These are the moments they'll remember. She glanced over at Sophie, laughing with her friends, her whole face lit up with happiness. She looks so much like you. We ended up talking, swapping stories about our kids, single parenting, and the unexpected ways life had moved on. There was an ease in our conversation, a comfort that felt natural, as though we'd known each other for years. When Sophie ran back over, she saw Rachel and without hesitation, pulled her onto the dance floor with us. The three of us danced, laughing and twirling under the gym's soft lights, the music echoing around us. In that moment, there was no past, no bitterness, just a shared happiness, simple and real. As the evening wrapped up, I felt lighter, as though a fresh start wasn't such a distant possibility. That night, as Sophie and I left the dance, her small hand in mine, something shifted within me, a quiet sense of hope for whatever might lie ahead. After the dance, life settled into a rhythm, but there was a new kind of lightness to it. Sophie and I were stronger than ever, our routines familiar but meaningful. She'd bring up the dance now and then, always with a huge smile, and it was clear that the memory had become something special for her. For me, too, it had marked a turning point, proof that even after everything, I could find happiness, for both of us. Over time, Rachel and I kept in touch casually, just checking in now and then. There was a comfort in our conversations, an understanding that required no explanation, as if we'd both been through the same storm and found a calm in each other's company. Sometimes she'd share a funny story about her daughter, or we'd vent about the ups and downs of single parenting. It felt easy, unforced. One Sunday afternoon, Rachel texted me out of the blue, asking if Sophie and I would like to join her and her daughter, Lily, for a day at the local park. Sophie, overhearing me read the message, was instantly excited. Yes, yes. Let's go, Daddy, she insisted, practically dragging me to the door before I even had a chance to answer. When we arrived, Rachel was already there, setting up a picnic blanket near the playground while Lily ran ahead. She looked up and waved, her face lighting up in that familiar, genuine way. Hey there, she greeted as we walked over, Sophie and Lily already dashing toward the swings, their laughter echoing across the park. We spent the afternoon watching them play, joining in here and there, laughing as they took turns trying to outswing each other. Rachel had brought snacks and a thermos of coffee, and as we sat on the picnic blanket, we talked about everything and nothing. Parenting, favorite childhood memories, plans for the summer. It felt effortless, like reconnecting with an old friend. At one point, Sophie and Lily ran over to us, pink-cheeked and breathless. Daddy, push us on the merry-go-round, Sophie exclaimed, her eyes bright with excitement. I followed them over, giving the merry-go-round a few good spins, watching their laughter grow louder with each turn. Rachel joined me, and soon we were both laughing along with them, letting ourselves be as carefree as the kids, if only for a few moments. As the sun began to dip, we packed up the picnic, Rachel and I exchanging a smile as the girls begged for just 5 more minutes. It was a day full of simple joys, but those are the ones that seem to mean the most. Before we left, Rachel and I exchanged numbers with a promise to do this again soon. Driving home, I felt a warmth I hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of connection, of new possibilities. As Sophie dozed off in the back seat, her face still lit with that happy, peaceful expression, I realized that life was moving forward, slowly but surely. And, for the first time in a while, I was excited to see where it would go. After that day at the park, Rachel and I started meeting up more often, sometimes with the kids and sometimes just for coffee. There was an ease in her company, a sense of shared understanding that was hard to come by. Rachel had a quiet resilience, a strength that had grown through everything she'd been through, and I found myself admiring it more each time we met. One weekend, we took the girls to a nearby nature reserve. It was the first warm day of spring, and the air was fresh and alive, full of possibilities. Sophie and Lily ran ahead, stopping to point out every flower and stone, their laughter echoing through the trees. Rachel and I walked behind, talking as we navigated the trail, falling into our familiar, easy rhythm. When we reached a small clearing with a view of the valley, the girls found a fallen log to sit on, eagerly digging into snacks we'd packed. Rachel and I took a seat nearby, letting the quiet settle around us. The view was beautiful. Rolling hills stretched out in layers, with trees swaying in the breeze. Rachel looked over at me, her gaze thoughtful. "It's nice to be able to enjoy days like this again," she said quietly. "I didn't think I'd find this kind of peace, especially not with someone who understands." I nodded, understanding. Some days, I feel like I'm still piecing things together. But here, with them and, well, with you, it feels like I'm finally starting to let things go. She smiled, a soft, real smile. Maybe we both needed to find people who get it, who know what it means to rebuild. The moment felt genuine, like we'd found something steady in each other, a quiet space where the weight of the past didn't intrude. Then, out of nowhere, Sophie and Lily dashed over, grabbing our hands, pulling us toward a new path. We followed them, laughing, as they led us down a narrow trail to a hidden pond, their voices echoing with excitement as they made up stories about fairies and hidden treasures in the water. Rachel and I joined in, their enthusiasm contagious, each of us swept up in the kind of pure, childlike joy that's easy to lose. When the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over everything, we packed up, and Rachel glanced at me with a glint of something hopeful in her eyes. "We should do this again," she said, her tone light but carrying a warmth I hadn't felt in a long time. I smiled, nodding, and in that quiet moment, I felt like we'd both found something worth holding on to. The summer had settled in with a warm, easy pace, and I found myself looking forward to each day a little more. One afternoon, while I was at the grocery store, my phone buzzed. It was Rachel, suggesting something a bit different than our usual meetups, a kayaking trip along the river just outside town, a spot known for its calm waters and scenic views. The idea had a spark to it, something fresh, and when I told Sophie about it, her face lit up with excitement. The next weekend, we all met at the river's edge. The water shimmered under the morning sun, and a cool breeze swept through the trees lining the bank. Sophie and Lily were already bouncing with energy, life jackets on, begging to get out on the water. Rachel shot me a grin as we loaded the kayaks, clearly just as eager as the kids to shake things up. We paired up, Sophie with me and Lily with Rachel, and set out along the winding river. The girls splashed each other with their paddles, laughing wildly, their laughter mingling with the sounds of the forest around us. After a while, they spotted a family of ducks gliding nearby, and we paused to watch them, the girls whispering excitedly about naming each one. Rachel and I drifted a little ways behind them, sharing quiet smiles, letting the simple peace of the moment settle in. Every so often, I'd catch Rachel's gaze, and each time, I felt a bit of the guardedness I'd been holding on to slip away. Just as we rounded a bend in the river, Sophie let out a gasp, pointing to a small sandy spot along the bank. "Can we stop there?" she asked, her eyes wide with excitement. We paddled over, pulling our kayaks onto the shore. The girls immediately ran to the water's edge, splashing each other and digging in the sand. Rachel and I joined them, playfully helping them shape a sandcastle with sticks and smooth stones, turning the little bank into our own tiny world. At one point, Sophie and Lily broke off to explore, their voices echoing as they chased after a line of bright red dragonflies. Rachel and I lingered by the water, our feet sinking into the sand. There was a playful gleam in her eyes as she splashed me, catching me off guard. I laughed, splashing her back, and soon we were in a full-on water fight, laughing like kids, the years of struggle and heartbreak feeling miles away. When we finally pulled the girls back into the kayaks to head home, the sun was low, casting the river in a golden glow. The paddle back was quiet, a kind of contentment settling over us. As we reached the shore and loaded up the gear, Rachel turned to me, a warm, easy smile on her face. "That was perfect," she said, her voice soft, sincere. I nodded, smiling back. "Let's make it a tradition." That night, after I'd tucked Sophie into bed, I realized how much had changed. This wasn't just moving forward, it was living fully again, with a future I hadn't seen coming. And for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to embrace every bit of it. Summer passed, and Rachel and I continued to meet up with the girls, our tradition quietly becoming a part of our lives. Our connection grew naturally, like we were building something on solid ground. Trust, laughter, and a simple joy in each other's company. It felt right, and for the first time, I wasn't guarded or second-guessing myself. I was all in. One weekend in early fall, Rachel invited us over for a small backyard cookout. Sophie and Lily spent the afternoon chasing each other around her yard, hiding in the trees and turning the yard into a makeshift forest fortress. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm glow over everything, and the smell of grilled burgers filled the air. After dinner, the girls sat on the porch steps, roasting marshmallows over a small fire pit while Rachel and I lingered at the picnic table, talking quietly. She shared stories from her childhood, her dreams of traveling more, of creating a life filled with meaning for herself and Lily. I found myself listening, drawn in by her honesty and the quiet strength beneath her words. As the evening wound down, Sophie and Lily brought over their marshmallows, each one burnt and lopsided, but they proudly handed them to us like gourmet creations. We laughed, taking a bite and pretending they were perfect, which made the girls giggle and run off to make more. Rachel and I exchanged a glance, smiling at each other in that way that held an unspoken understanding. Finally, the fire dimmed, and it was time to go. As we gathered our things, Rachel walked with me to the car while the girls chatted in the back seat. She paused as I opened the door, a shy, warm look in her eyes. "I'm really glad we've had this time together," she said softly. "It feels like things are falling into place, doesn't it?" I nodded, feeling the same way. "Yeah, it does. I couldn't ask for more." There was a brief, charged silence, and then, without overthinking it, I leaned in and kissed her, a gentle, simple kiss that felt like the natural ending to the night. When I pulled back, she was smiling, her face a mixture of surprise and happiness. "See you soon?" she asked, a soft laugh escaping. "Absolutely," I replied, unable to keep the grin off my face. On the drive home, Sophie chattered away about her plans to make a real marshmallow restaurant, oblivious to the change in me. But I could feel it. There was no longer a lingering sense of loss, no more shadows of the past. What I had now was solid, real, a life built on love and hope, with Sophie by my side and a new beginning unfolding in front of me. As I tucked Sophie in that night, she hugged me tight, and I felt a deep, steady happiness settle over me. I had found my way back, stronger and more certain, ready to embrace whatever came next.